Welcome back to the Afterword, a conversation about the future of words. We are talking about sports accessibility, and we are so glad to have Skeeter Powell and Carly Mellor here with us to continue our conversations. We're talking about how we can level the playing field for everyone. Are there sports or events that you would like to see that offer more accessibility to athletes? And if so, how could these be developed?
Carly, help.
Well, my view kind of comes not from a specific sport necessarily, but to me, the best way that we can continue to develop accessibility in our communities, whether that's sports or other needs for people with disabilities, is just coming down to awareness. And although that seems a little cliche, it's very true. The more that people know about the importance of accessibility for our athletes, and the more they're willing to invest in their community, whether it's a volunteer or a coach or donating to local programs, the greater chances that we have to grow our programs and to create new ones when the need comes.
And that's so true. And I think the more we can make what's happening with Special Olympics or with Spearhead or with Tennis on Tuesday, the more we can say that this is available. And I appreciate the podcast that's going to say that to folks. The more of our friends, some of whom we don't know yet, will find out about it and want to come play. And there will also be other folks who would have a relative with a disability and might say, ooh, I didn't know that could happen. And they might want to come and be a part of that. So Holland, you and Amy are doing our friends a great service to be able to tell the story.
Absolutely. It always surprises me how many people think that the Special Olympics is one event. That's all that the Special Olympics is. And we are so much more than that. We're year-round sports of 8 to 10 weeks or even more seasons. We've got tons of sports going on and all over the world. We've got athletes going to local competitions, state, USA games, and even world games. So it's a huge service and a big program. So it's not just one event. So it's definitely getting the awareness out there so that people can participate how they would like.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, one of the things that has been powerful for me is I believe it's each spring, the schools bring their Special Olympics teams to Furman. And if you want an emotional experience, you need to be there as the athletes march onto the field. And the last time I went, I think there were something like 3,000 athletes and volunteers that were on the athletic field at Furman. Who knew? It was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a huge event. It's amazing. And I'm new to this role, so I haven't yet seen, and with COVID and all the pandemic stuff, we have not held that big event for a couple of years. So I'm so excited next year to get on that and be able to experience that for the first time.
Yeah. And to your point, Carly, I mean, that's just one city. One city sponsoring that event. And there are those events happening all around the country and all around the world. So that's so exciting. Okay, so let's go down another avenue. And as we're thinking about this, because there's a balance. And I love that you use the word awareness, Carly. And that is such it sometimes can seem like a cliche word, but it's very, very important. So let's talk about, how do you balance agency and autonomy for athletes, and maybe who might need protection at times, who might be vulnerable, but also give them that respect and that agency. So could you both share some tips for parents and caregivers that they need to keep in mind as they're supporting their athletes? Because I think this is a balance. You know, we don't want to do everything for the athlete, and they don't want us to either. So what are some tips that we can do to balance that, Carly?
First of all, I think balance is totally the word. That's exactly, hits the nail on the head. But I think the most important thing to remember, and this doesn't just, fall under this topic, but it's really to treat an individual as an individual. not as a disability group. So when you think about a person with autism is not the same as the next person with autism, and the boundaries can't always be the same for one person compared to the next person. So I think as providers and caregivers and families of people with disabilities, we can't live in a very black and white, this is right, this is wrong, this works, this doesn't world. There's a lot of flexibility and a lot of gray area. So, and I know that's kind of hard for some people. Some people, their mind is very much, it's A, B, and it's black and white. But when we take the time to get to know our individuals and get to really become friends with them and to see what needs they have, and not base our decisions on their safety or on their autonomy on a diagnosis, that's when we can really create that environment that is safe for them and that they do get to make their own decisions, and we can create success for that person. We need to figure out who we're serving on an individual level instead of trying to blanket rules for a group of people. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I really appreciate
And I would say amen to that. I think sometimes mother, and it's usually mother, there are some wonderful mothers, and they are bound and determined for their children to have a good experience no matter what. Sometimes that's good for their child. Sometimes it may not be. But I think overall, the more the family can be involved, for a lot of the things that we do, we want our friend to come, our friend with a disability to come, but we want their parents to know what's happening. We want them to be involved until, one, either they feel comfortable saying, okay, Fred is going to be here to play tennis. I'll be back in an hour. And they're comfortable with that. We know how to care for that person. If need be, we know what to look for. The other side of that is the parent. Let's take the tennis again. Mom comes with her daughter, and they find out that their child is having a really good time, and Mama plays tennis. Oh, maybe she can help. Oh, I can help. Oh, I want to help. And then what that does is that begins to create community. So many of our families are alone, and they're struggling alone. And as they can come together as a family with other families, that is an amazing thing.
I love the ripple effect that causes. And again, talking about balance and agency, and just like you were saying, Carly, we want this for everybody. Everyone wants a community. Everyone wants to feel included. So these are great points.
And many people have their first experience with sports on a school playground during recess. What are some of the ways that schools and daycares and people who play in community parks can make those spaces more accessible and inclusive?
I know with Special Olympics, there's a big movement now for unified programs. And unified essentially means that we are a team together. So you have athletes and non-athletes, people with disabilities, people without disabilities, all working together. And that might be a sports team, it might be a club, it might be a class or a gym class. But creating those bonds early on really can shape the way that a person thinks about disabilities for the rest of their lives. And I think, you could either go and create a new program, create new events, new clubs that give the students with and without disabilities time and opportunity to work together, or just using what you have and ensuring that the people with disabilities in your school really feel like they're part of that team and that they are included in that. To me, it's something that it can really change your life. And the earlier we can start doing that and we can involve everyone and make sure that everyone feels included, the better. And again, as I said before, just really getting to know that individual person. You can't serve a community from a bird's eye view always. Really getting your feet on the ground, getting to know the people, becoming friends with them. Your program will be better for that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Understanding that people with disabilities are a large community, but they're not a homogenous community, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Skeeter.
And I think a part of it too is encouraging our friends to become sports fans. I think this is a favorite story, but I volunteered at a school that got caught up in the building program a bunch of years ago. So they got a brand new school and they got a brand new football stadium, and it was built to ADA standards. But what that meant was there's a space for 2 wheelchairs and then a bench, a space for 2 more wheelchairs and a bench. And if you want to sit in the student section and you're in a wheelchair, well, the students are standing where you would sit. Long story, but now at that high school, there's a wonderful place for our friends with disabilities to sit. If they're not in a wheelchair, they need to bring a chair. And now we sit in front of the student body, so we get to be involved in that. They want to come sit where we sit because we got the best seats. And we also are in front of the cheerleaders, and the guys don't mind. And we sit from like the 45-yard line down to the 15-yard line. So we really are involved in the sports. We might not be playing, but we're yelling and screaming along with the student body. And that hadn't happened at a lot of places. The sports fan, it's hard to be included if you can't sit with your friends.
That's an excellent point. So let's take this into something that both of you have talked a little bit about. And I want you to think big picture because, Carly, I heard you share on our earlier episode about how when you think about accessibility, it's also people. So let's talk about those who might want to become a volunteer. And so those who do not have a disability to become more engaged in adaptive sports or inclusive sports. What are some best practices that you would want your volunteers to know? And also, what are some ways they can put their toe in the water, if you will?
Sure. It's really hard to describe effectively the impact that spending a season with our athletes can have on people. And I know I've kind of touched on that before, but it's just something that we can talk about, but until you really experience it, you can't quite grasp it. I know that a lot of our volunteers come and they say, well, I don't think I can volunteer for tennis season because I've never played tennis before. And we can teach you how to coach tennis. We can teach you some tips and tricks to use with the athletes. Like, we can get you there, but all you really need to bring is just a heart to serve people and an understanding that we're there to create a fun environment, a safe environment, and an inclusive environment. And the magic happens after that. So it's not something that people should be afraid of if they if they're not a professional tennis player, or even if they never played tennis. We just love the experience and the bonding and the friendships that makes. And that a lot of times is so much more important than the actual sport.
And I'm sure that relates to lots of other sports besides tennis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't really matter. We played tennis. We helped one high school with PE. We played tennis once a week for 4 weeks. And we had a whole bunch of folks from the United States Tennis Association come help. They know how to play tennis, but they're not so sure about playing tennis with our friends. And the best part of it is some of them now have some friends with a disability. Our friends learned how to grip a racket. Yeah, that's where we started. They know how to swing a forehand and sometimes hit the ball. And then they learn how to swing a backhand and sometimes hit the ball and then serve. And we actually had what some would call an up and down, where we had one of our friends team up with a USTA player and they played a game in front of their friends. Now, our friends really enjoyed it, but the folks that really played tennis had their eyes open and their hearts open, and that was really good.
That's wonderful. So if somebody wanted to become a volunteer with any organization, what would you say would be the best place to start?
start by reaching out, start by asking questions, start by getting to know who you're serving and where you can fit in that. I guarantee you there's a role for you in Special Olympics if you want to get involved. And that might be a day event. It might be a tournament. It might be a 10-week long season. But it's a wonderful experience, and you should definitely try it. Give it a try. I mean, that's all I can say is really just go for it.
And you may find that some of your neighbors that you don't know have that special child, and you get to have some new folks as friends. Come try.
All right. We have one final question we like to ask, and that is, what's a metaphor to help us better understand accessibility in sports?
I don't know if it's a great one, but it's something that people could relate to, I think. So imagine someone buys you a new car and you're so excited. You get a brand new car. You can see it, you can touch it, you can smell it, but they don't give you the keys. You don't have all the tools that you need to use that car and to access that car.
Right. And I think that is a great metaphor. And I'd add to that, if your feet work, then you can work the gas pedal and the brake pedal. If your feet don't work, you need a little bit of help to be able to drive that car. You need some technology to drive that car. You need somebody to teach you to drive that car. And then you're independent and you can drive that car.
Wow. Very good. Thank you both so much. This has been absolutely eye-opening.
Those metaphors remind me a little bit of, do you remember the episode we did on people with dementia?
Uh-huh.
And when Dr. Jennifer Butte used her example was you walk up to a house and you knock on the front door and nobody answers. Well, that's okay. There's a back door and there's a ladder and a window upstairs and there's all kinds of other ways into the house. It reminded me of Carly's metaphor of the car. Okay, so you don't have the keys or you don't have the brake pedal or whatever. But maybe if somebody gives you a different way to get there, you can still drive that car, or you can still get in that house, or you just need a different access point or a different tool.
Very good. Excellent. I love how you tied that in, Holland.
All right. Well, thank you both very, very much. Skeeter, where can folks learn more about you or connect with your work at David's Table?
There's a website. It's davidstableonline.org. That would be the easy way to. A phone number is fine with me, 864-915-2479. I will answer that telephone myself.
I can verify that.
and with no experience necessary. A background check might be, but no experience necessary.
Okay.
Carly, how can people volunteer at Special Olympics or get in touch with you?
Sure. They can follow along with us and see all of our happenings and all our fun stuff we've got going on Facebook at Special Olympics SC Greenville, on Instagram at specialoly_Greenville SC. And you can email me directly at cmellor@greenvillecounty.org, which is CMELLOR@greenvillecounty.org.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who's listening, we ask you to join us next week for a conversation. We'll be talking about social and emotional lessons learned in sports.
Yeah, this is going to be a continuation of our theme about sports and entertainment. So we're so grateful to have Carly and Skeeter with us tonight, and looking forward to all these wonderful conversations. And we do ask all of our listeners, please leave us a review, rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Become a subscriber to theafterwordpodcast.com. It does help us keep the conversations going. And as always, you are welcome at our table.